6 people. Nice.
Peter Stromberg apologizes. Did you respond
That
as
was me.
apropos?
Yeah.
Okay, all
Mhm.
right. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Peter, you couldn't make it. We had to change the time for this one.
All
Okay,
right, we
welcome
are
to
live.
Apropos, the show about Clojure, where you can watch us live on YouTube. So hit subscribe if you wanna be notified and everything. Or you can just watch us later on YouTube. We're also there. And now we have special guest. But first, let me introduce the panel. Today we have Mia
Hi.
and I'm Eric. Hello. And our special guest is Christoph. Now wait, should I give the German pronunciation?
You
Dies
can. Yeah, you
Neumann?
Neumann? Yes. So I
Is that
usually
what you
have people
say?
call me Newman
Newman.
because Newman's easier in English. But yes,
That's
Christoph
right.
Neumann, Newman.
That's noise to me.
When I want people to slow down and spell it, I say Neumann.
Uh-huh. Got it.
Because when I say Newman, people very confidently know how to spell Newman, which is
That's
not
Right.
the way I
true.
The
spell it.
Yeah.
Newman. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I'm sympathetic because my name has a D at the end. And so I have to say Normand, like
Yeah.
really emphasize that D. And
Let
then,
the D linger. Duh.
yes, that's right. Um,
I
Go ahead.
well, I just think it'd be wonderful to not have to spell my name over the phone. Uh, when we
Mm.
got married, I pitched my husband that we should become the Smith family. Uh,
Yes.
and now we can both change our names. Nothing's stopping us. He
Right.
said no.
I made the mistake of putting my name in my email address. And so then now I have
Mm.
to spell my email address all the time. And the stakes are even higher
Yeah,
because if you get it wrong, you won't be able to communicate with
that's
me.
right. Yeah, I did the same. I couldn't get my name just first and last, so I put my middle initial in there, and that has caused all sorts of problems. People
Oh, yeah.
forget it, and like they're like, "Where were you?" Like, I didn't get your message. Like, why not? You don't know how to use email? And I'm like, I didn't get it. Yeah.
I'm hearing there's like this is a soft marker of how old you are in the workplace is whether you have numbers in your personal email or not.
Oh,
Like,
Oh.
it's if
you
you
because you got it early.
yeah, you got it early enough that it's your name and people and like younger people are like, "Oh my God, how'd you do that?" Like,
I was there.
what's
I remember when you
what's
had
your
to ask for
secret?
an invite to Gmail. Like,
I had a hellokitty.com email address.
no
Nice.
way.
Yeah, hellokitty.com had email for
Wow.
Wow. That's
brief
That's
and
old
awesome.
school.
brief
Yeah.
and blissful time. Yeah, I used to be able to put little Hello Kitty stamps on it.
Wow. Okay, let's get to closure. Um, so Christoph, just to start us off, can you show us your editor setup and tell us about it?
Okay, let me see
Oh
if
wait,
I
I need
can.
to enable sharing. Hang on. I can do that real fast. There you go.
Sure. Do that. Can take a moment. Oh, yeah.
So what you're about to see, everyone, is the official, official
Oh, no.
Oh,
editor
and look, we
setup
have a
for the Clojure language.
Oh, no.
Oh, and I love the colors. Okay. All
Okay.
are you
right.
Are
telnetted into something?
are you? Yeah. So there's a story. There's a story here. So my buddy Nate Jones, with whom I do the functional design enclosure podcast, he got me hooked on remote development. I don't, I can't even tell you when. And so yeah, so I learned Vim a long time ago when I was an undergrad, continued to use it. So I tend to use tools that I can use inside of a terminal. So in this case, I'm running Windows and I'm running a virtual machine, which is running Ubuntu, and I have my whole Clojure setup in there. And I
Hmm.
started doing that because I switched to I used to use Mac until I got involved in gaming. And so
Hmm.
I've done a ton of work in esports. And it turns out if you work in esports, if you let's say I was working with Call of Duty, it's really useful to play Call of Duty if you have to do a bunch of work in Call of Duty. Otherwise, you have no idea what anything is.
So wait, when you say
And
you worked in esports, were you a developer on an esports
oh
platform or what
yeah,
do you?
so my background is I worked in live events, and so I wrote the integration for Call of Duty to integrate with all of the video production equipment that was
Oh,
used for the Call of Duty League. That is
okay.
to some extent still used for the Call of Duty League. Yeah.
Cool.
That is
And
very
so
cool.
so I switched to Windows. And so then when I switched to Windows, I didn't really want to give up my lovely Unix based development environment. So I started running a virtual machine because Windows subsystem for Linux did not exist at that time.
Right.
And so yeah, so I have my editor here. Here I'm using Stasis to create my personal website. And so what I have going is I'm using Tmux. And Tmux, I'm assuming people are familiar with Tmux. Maybe they're not. So Tmux lets you run multiple terminals. So I have two different
Hmm.
terminals down here in a split. So the bottom area I'm running a REPL, and
Oh,
in the top area I'm running NeoVim,
got
and
it.
NeoVim is using Conjure. And so I can go here and I have my integrated REPL integrated editor. So I can go here and evaluate
Hmm?
this. Takes a moment the first time, but see, I got my little answer of
Oh,
3.
cool.
But I can also open up a split if I just want to keep it up, so evaluate it. And the way I do this is down here in some comments, I can fire up the dev server. So I would run here, I run the binding, which is a Conjure thing. So I run the binding, the key sequence because it's Vim to evaluate the whole file.
Hmm.
And so that is gonna take a minute the first time.
So
But then
you've
after I
got
do, yeah, go ahead.
so you've got a REPL running, you connect to the REPL
Mm-hmm. Using
within
Conjure in NeoVim.
within NeoVim. So you're getting your print lines down at the bottom, but your evals are showing up in the split on the right. Is
Bingo.
that right?
Yep.
Okay,
Something
cool.
almost oracular about the setup. Like it feels like you're asking a faraway entity to provide the answer.
But yeah, it's like a portal into another dimension. You got
Yeah,
a virtual Ubuntu box running on your machine.
you've summoned Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Summoned Ubuntu. VS Code has this notion of a remote also. And so you can connect to a remote environment where it runs um, a little process on the other side. So that it's that same idea. You're using a local application, but then all the files and everything you're interacting with is remote.
Uh-huh.
And so, like I said, Nate got me hooked on the idea of remote development, and I love it because I can do it on this VM. I can switch VMs. I can have a dedicated development server, and I can. All I need is a terminal. All I need is Putty or a terminal application, so I can open up my large iPad. I have one of those like 13-inch iPads, and get a keyboard and
Oh, that's
SSH
awesome.
in.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, it's a bit old school. So I've used Calva. I recommend Calva to people. I've used Calva too, but my daily driver is using a NeoVim and Conjure within a terminal using Tmux for splits, and yeah, and
This is
then
why I love this question. I love seeing how people live. We have never gotten the same answer twice.
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah. And everybody's like, "Oh, it's nothing special." And then it's very different from everybody else.
yeah,
It's
it's
kind of
nothing
special.
special. It's just my tunnel to a secret dimension where I consult an oracle. This
yeah,
it's very this is what we're looking at is your personal website.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I'm using Stasis. Um, and Stasis is a static website building micro framework.
Hmm.
And
Enclosure.
Enclosure, yeah.
Cool.
And then there's PowerPack, which puts content management together with static website building. And it's what's his
Okay.
name? Johansson. I'm totally blanking. I'm very sorry. I'm really bad with names, and I have it right at hand, but I'm really
And
bad
do
with
you
names.
use the same setup at work?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool.
So for example, for all the work I've done in esports, once again, yeah, using NeoVim. When I started, it was Vim, not NeoVim. NeoVim sort of came and took over the world, which is great, and Conjure. So I used to use
I still
sort
call it
of
VI.
Vim with Vim Fireplace, and then I switched at Nate's prompting, switched to NeoVim and Conjure, and I would heartily, if you're a Vim user, I would heartily recommend.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then, like dev workflow, I can go here and I can evaluate within this comment to start the dev server. And I always leave myself little readmes because I can never remember anything, right? In the moment. When
Sure.
this comes from esports, when you are trying to figure out why something is broken and you have an audience of thousands of people that are going to be watching really soon, you don't want to try to remember things. You
No.
just want to make sure that you have told your future self everything you need to know in that moment. And
Yes.
so,
So you can do it
so
kind of mindlessly. Just follow the
yeah.
steps. Hmm.
So I, as if I'm telling somebody else for the first time, I write those steps down so that I can read them. If I'm operating on 3 hours of sleep and more stress than is probably healthy, and I can still be successful. And so I use ASDF, which I would also heartily recommend for managing different versions of Clojure and Java and Node and things like that. And we tend to use make files as a simple way of running little things instead of a bunch of small script files. And I write myself little notes here. And so this lets me run the dev server, and then I can open that up on the dev port there, port 9000. And Chi here, which you'll see is a library for allowing you to get a web console. When you run something on a mobile device, you can open a web console on your dev computer, and instead of having to deal with the web console on an iPhone, which is a special kind of horror that I don't recommend for anyone.
I
So it
can't
allows me to
imagine.
have the web. So I open up my website on my iPhone to test it, or on an Android phone. I have those too. And then Android makes it pretty easy to get your web console on your computer, but Apple does not unless you have a Mac. And so since I was doing Windows dev for years, I did not have a Mac. And so then she makes it easy to open up a web console on your desktop and interact with it, but the web console is for the environment on your phone.
Okay.
So I build all that in. So I start the server, and then I can run, if I want to restart the server, I stop it. So I just evaluate it here, and then I have some things in here to help me see things. So I can just evaluate these expressions if I want. And so in this case, I was looking at for all of the assets. So those are images and static assets. And over here, it's showing me, I did the p print. I don't know why I did the p because I'm in a REPL, so I can just evaluate the map line instead
Hmm.
and get it p
Ooh.
printed for me in the REPL. But it shows me all the image assets. And so, yeah, that's how I work. It's very interactive. I put together the DREF, the Clojure DREF. I've been doing that lately. Same thing. I have Nate and I like to call this sort of a fiddle workflow. So you have it's not just like this is kind of simple. The DREF is clear. It's sort of like you have so many rich comments, and the rich comments have comments about the comments that it feels more like a notebook. So
Yeah, right.
when you have a file that's driving a workflow, and it's an interactive REPL, like connected REPL workflow, and then you have comments for the comments, and so you're kind of going through comment blocks evaluating things, then you end up with what we call the fiddle workflow, because it feels kind of like a notebook. You're fiddling.
Right.
um
Right. I
so
mean, and the only thing it's missing from a notebook is sort of like now I can graph something, right?
yeah,
Um,
so here oh yeah,
right.
Christian Johansson. So here, this is what I use to do the Clojure DREF, right? So I have um lookup tables, I have all this code, right? And so because it's a REPL, you can test things as you build it. So here I was writing a regular expression because I'm reading data in from a file, and I want that data, if it has a leading semicolon, to be treated like a comment. So I go here and I can evaluate that.
So about the Clojure DREF, for those who don't know, it's kind of like a little news summary, like links to cool things around the web. And is that your responsibility now?
Yeah, I took it on.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And
Because
so I've done it 4 times. Yeah.
nice. Um, so for people who don't know, Christoph recently started at Nubank as the developer advocate. Is that the
Yes.
title?
Yes.
Closure
Closure
developer
developer
advocate?
advocate. So
Cool.
developer advocate. Mm-hmm.
And so what's your main like mission there?
So my main mission is to really enable people to get started with Clojure and like become successful with Clojure, both from the very beginning and then as they kind of grow and mature as Clojure developers. And so the idea for any developer advocate is to really help people use that technology successfully, right?
Hmm.
And because Clojure is a general purpose programming language, what does success look like? Well, in the early days, success is really just getting it running at all, right?
Yeah.
Getting it running, learning the basics of the language, learning the syntax, and all that. But as you kind of mature, then it's using more of the language, discovering what idiomatic Clojure is, uh, finding the parts of Clojure that help you with the domain you're working in. Are you front end? Are you back end? Full stack? What kind of problems are you working on? You're working on big data problems? Are you working on other kind of information modeling problems? Excuse me, or a game or anything like that.
So who's your
So
audience for this?
my audience is Clojure developers. Yeah,
Well, is
or budding Clojure developers, right?
where are they? Like where are you
Where are you
Global.
looking? Where are you finding them?
yeah.
Yeah, global. I mean, historically, there's obviously concentrations of Clojure developers in North America and Europe and South America, and worldwide, right? We have Australia and New Zealand and Africa, and so there's Clojure developers all over the world. But we have yeah, we have heavier concentrations of Clojure developers in North America, Europe, and South America, and
So
Australia.
I think by where are they, I meant not
In their
not
journey,
necessarily yes, yes.
in
In
their
their
Clojure
journey,
journey.
is this are you I have people that come to me and they say I want to learn Clojure, but I don't know where to start. Is is that your audience?
Yes, absolutely. I
So
think so. That's part of. So I've been on the job for a little while, and I haven't done a ton publicly yet. right? Because I've been in an information gathering phase.
Mm.
So I've personally, so my a little bit background on my Clojure story is the first time I saw Clojure, I thought it was nuts,
Hmm.
and I thought it was like a toy, and I thought, oh, like I've always been a programming languages nerd. I studied programming languages in grad school. I wanted to be a researcher in programming languages. And so that's the first time I ever used functional programming. It was in Haskell. It was very nerdy, and I kind of hated it actually. And I thought Skull was awesome. And so the first time I saw Clojure, I ended up discovering I don't want to be a research professor, so I went back into industry. And I had a buddy at work, a guy named Keith Irwin, showed me Clojure, and I was just like, why would anybody use this? So it took me about 3 years to take Clojure seriously, almost four. And then as he kind of helped me through those hurdles, and there was a lot of hurdles because I had learned programming languages really quickly, and Clojure I did not learn it quickly, and I've reflected on like why was that so challenging for me to pick up Clojure? Because at that point in time, by the time I learned Clojure, I already knew I don't know more than a dozen different programming languages. I had already used a bunch of them professionally, and so I was like, why is this so hard to learn? And there's a few reasons why it's hard to learn. There's the syntax, so that takes some getting used to, and but there's a whole workflow around it. There's editing, there's structural editing, there's that takes some getting. So I was not using any kind of support to help me balance parentheses. I was hitting the space bar to align things.
Hmm.
Um, and I literally just did not get how to edit the code, right? And my buddy Keith had to be like, no, this is how you edit the code. And so there's editing, there's the concepts, it's functional, there's immutability. So there's like all these little pieces that all come together in a unique way. And so it took me a while. But then I'd use Clojure. I started to really use Clojure consistently for fun to solve like little programming puzzles and stuff in about 2012. And so I've been using it for a long time, and I've been in the community for a long time. And I started using it in for doing esports production in 2015. And then I had to take it really seriously because live events, when you make mistakes, everybody's watching. It's
Hmm.
rough.
Hmm.
And so you don't want to make mistakes. You want high reliability, high certainty, high predictability, great performance.
And do you feel like
So I've
Clojure gives you that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I ended up like using it and loving it.
Hmm.
And so I've been on the community side. I haven't really been on uh part of any process for I've been in my own niche, my own little section of the community. And so now stepping in this role, I'm interacting with a much broader swath of the community than I have interacted with before. And when you hear like, oh, somebody's been hired to make Clojure, great for you, it's like, yeah, but I can't help everybody all the time in all the ways. So I've spent a lot of time meeting with people and doing assessment to go, okay, where do I want to begin to apply some effort? You know, and because I could, there is an infinite amount, not truly infinite, but it might as well be infinite amount of things that could be done. So where do you spend time? And so what I've concluded over the last month or so is I think it'll be very beneficial to focus on some of those
Mhm.
early steps, because people who already are using Clojure successfully, I'd love to sweeten their success. That's great, but getting somebody started using Clojure is the biggest win, right? Because that helps grow the community. And honestly, it's deeper than that, because part of the reason Clojure has stuck for me is after I transitioned to this different way of development, right? Because Clojure is more than just a syntax, it's more than just a language. There's the choices that Rich made in Clojure are a unique combination of things. And so there's kind of a workflow, a way of
Yeah.
thinking, a way of going about development. It's very novel and very unique. And so if I can give somebody a taste of what that is, it's so
Yeah.
much deeper and more rich than just simply another programming language,
Hmm.
right? And
Mm.
so then that's mind expanding, perspective altering. And so I just think that's such a great opportunity to help pave and smooth the way from thinking like I did, like, oh, I get programming. I can learn a new language in a couple of weeks. Like I know what programming is all about. To run up into something that was called programming and is an old language, Lisp, and then bounce off of it and realize that, oh man, there is so much more to learn that I don't know yet.
Hmm.
Right. So I wanna help people discover that. I think that's huge.
So
So
where do
do
you
you, oh,
where do you see the biggest hurdles in this like getting started and the
I
getting
think
that deep experience part, right? That's
Yeah, I think there's a few. It let me flip it. Let me flip the question a little bit. What do you need to know to really begin to feel successful in closure, right? And I would say you what do you need to know or have? So you need to have a working runtime.
hmm
You need, kind of basics like up and
right.
working runtime. You need to have some way of editing the code and
Hmm.
that you feel comfortable with. You need to get over that sounds negative, but you need to be exposed to the Lisp syntax and let your eyes and mind adjust a little. That,
Sure.
believe it or not, that is a hurdle.
Huge. Huge.
You can look
Hmm.
at Lisp and it can look like line noise and move on, right? And so it takes a little bit of an adjustment to like see Lisp and read it. And so you kind of have to contend with the syntax, contend with the runtime, contend with your editing environment. But then you have this whole idea of a REPL oriented workflow, which Nate and I call a connected editor workflow, right? REPL connected editor. To
Yeah.
to say, because I misunderstood that when I first started Clojure. I thought literally what people meant when they were talking about a REPL workflow was you type your code out at the REPL prompt and hit
And it
enter.
saves it and like
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then you copy and paste it into your source file. I was for real.
Oh.
I was doing this.
Uh-huh.
And then people kept talking about cider, cider, cider. And I just thought it was a library. I didn't know what
Mm.
cider was. And so then I learned like, oh, cider is the code word for connecting Emacs to the REPL and doing interactive development. And well, I was using Vim, so I wasn't using cider. We were using incurses and we're using in REPL. And so we started calling it a REPL connected editor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my buddy Keith also kind of helped me like, oh, you evaluate code here in your editor. And he tried to get me to use Emacs. He's a big Emacs fan. I still use Vim, so we know how that turned out. But that was a whole concept. So I would call it the REPL connected editor workflow. Right? You
Hmm.
fire up the REPL, you leave it running, you leave the runtime running. You're not compile, run, compile, run, compile, run. Every expression is an entry point. That's really cool and really
Very different from what
weird,
mm,
people are
yeah.
used to. Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Although you've kind of settled into an almost notebook-like workflow,
Hmm.
Yeah,
which, and we've talked about this a little bit before, how like Python with the Jupyter notebooks is starting to kind of enter into something like REPL connected.
right.
And you've did you when did you feel yourself moving into this notebook style workflow?
I think really in the as I began to work more and more in esports,
Mhm.
and then um so a little bit of history. I was an academic, then I went back into industry. I worked for Hewlett Packard for almost 5 years, doing a lot of manufacturing. So I really learned a ton about what it takes to be successful in a manufacturing environment in terms of writing software. And then I became independent and did a bunch of mobile and web application development. And then I started having the opportunity to work with esports. And my background in manufacturing was really helpful in working in live events because it's like you're building a temporary factory
Hmm.
for video, a temporary video factory. Um, and it needs to not crash. It needs to not fail. It needs to not give the wrong answer. It needs to not explode, right? And so
Yeah.
you need all the reliability that you have in a manufacturing environment, but it's temporary. And so it's very demanding. And I really enjoy really difficult things. So
Right.
I was like, this is great. And so I started working with that more and involved my friend Keith Irwin, who first brought me to Clojure in some of the early projects. And then but he had his own job and things going on. And then I ended up pulling my friend Nate Jones in. And then that collaboration had proved to be really beneficial collaboration. And that's when we started to evolve our workflows as the code base got bigger. And one of the things in these environments is we have all these data integrations. We needed to be able to work with a single data integration in isolation.
Hmm.
And so the idea that any expression can be an entry point into your code became incredibly useful, right?
Hmm.
So Stu Halloway calls it programming with scissors, which
Huh.
that metaphor never really made sense to me, but like it the way I think of it is every expression is now an entry point to kick off some code.
Yeah.
So we started thinking of ways where we could carve out a data path, and we could use data that we had recorded from a live event or data that we had, yeah, mostly data we had recorded, real data, and replay it into that data path sort of interactively from the REPL.
Hmm.
And that allowed us to get a high degree of certainty in this
Hmm.
code.
Yeah.
And it was very low friction because I did an integration with the Overwatch team. And so I went into Blizzard's headquarters in Irvine and sat down with them for a few days and developed a custom integration with them, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And while we were doing that, I recorded all the data from those sessions. And then I was able to replay that data. I didn't get to decide what was in that data. They didn't have a schema. They didn't go, oh, yeah, and here's our JSON schema. They didn't have any kind of like formal API documentation for this. Like literally, we were making it up as we go. And so I recorded all that data. I was able to take that data and play it back into the environment so that I knew and it's not like they gave me a copy of an Overwatch server and said, here you go, take this home. I mean, that stuff's locked up tight, right? So I had to work offline, separated from Overwatch and the team, and be ready to go into high stakes live production. And so being able to use that REPL, load that data in the REPL, examine the data using the REPL, find parts of it, pivot it, ETL it around in the REPL. That's really when that workflow started to emerge.
So your job was just live coding. Like this is
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that's so stressful.
Well,
Yeah, and well, so you're live coding while you're sort of figuring it all out,
Yeah.
and things are crystallizing into the system that you're going
yeah.
to use for real.
Yeah.
But the way a live event goes is you have typically 1 day for like load in, so you get everything set up and connected. So all these systems that I integrated with, I had to go sit and integrate with all of them in isolation separately from each other and can record data. And then I had to build this pipeline. And then Nate and I built this pipeline where we're merging this data together in real time. And then we set up 1 day and we connect all those systems. And then we do all our integration checks on all those systems. And then the next day is tech rehearsal. And you use it for real.
Uh-huh.
And so if you find anything, you have that night to fix it before the next day. And then if you find anything, you have that night to fix it before dress rehearsal. And then if you find anything, you have that night to fix it before you go live. And you really, really, really
Sounds.
don't want to be
Yeah,
fixing
it's a
anything after dress rehearsal. Yeah, and you really don't want to have to fix anything after tech rehearsal, ideally, too.
And do you
Right?
get like, do they issue like heart medication so that you can, make sure you don't have a heart attack,
You love it.
blood
You
pressure
love it or
stuff?
you don't. You're either a live events person or you're not, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like skydiving. I've never met anybody who's on the fence about skydiving. It's like, oh, it's, yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, sometimes, it's like you
Yeah.
love it or you're like, never gonna do it.
I mean, what you're saying about the REPL is the kind of thing that's really hard to communicate. I mean, in some ways, it sounds like you're like a great person to be an advocate to get people to understand this. But I've had that same experience, not quite as, on the edge as you, but um like dealing with APIs that are poorly documented. Um, often like I say poorly documented. Sometimes they have documentation, but it's wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it says we return false or true, but they return a null there, right? And just having to deal with this data that you don't really trust,
Mm,
but can kind of get to know it because you're working with it in the REPL, and you learn where you can trust it and where you can't, and how to mitigate and work around its problems, and in a way that I've just never experienced in another setup, because you're in the code. Like, so it's not just like, this is a thing that we talk about a lot with the REPL. Like, if you fire up a Python REPL, sure, you can type Python code, but you don't have all of your code there also.
Right.
So as you're like, oh, I need to redefine this function, let me modify it and like recompile it, and it's there, it's available. And how do you load a library, or not a library, like a code that's just there on your disk, into a Python thing and have it change as you, like, all that stuff is not obvious. It might be possible if you really tried. But uh, I just keep thinking of this thing Stu Halloway said, which was that REPL driven development is working with a incomplete and partially correct piece of software, but still being able to run it and work with it and modify it to get it more correct, to get it more complete.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Partiality is fine in Clojure, right? Partial.
Yeah.
You can work with partial things,
Yeah.
which is great because as you build systems, they're incomplete
Right.
until they're not.
Yeah.
And that's a first class experience. I gave a talk
And they're
at the
incorrect
conj.
until you debug them, right? Like you have to be able to
Right.
run them. Yeah.
Right. I gave a talk at the conj where I elaborate on this a lot more. So you can go watch from the 2024 talk. It's using Clojure in live sports production.
Hmm.
And but definitely in that talk I mentioned like the REPL, the connected editor, the REPL connected editor experience, right? Where you have your editor and you're evaluating things in the REPL, so to speak. It is like the meta tool
Yeah.
because you can get a purpose-built tool for calling a database and interacting with data from Postgres, for example. But if you interact with data from Postgres in your REPL, then you can take that data and you can start to pivot it and do things with it. And there's great tools for visualizing that data too. You can send it over into Portal to visualize it. We, believe it or not, we ended up using the JavaScript console, like we're logging out with Clojure script connected. We're logging things out in the console to view them
Mhm.
that way too. Um, and so there's great ways of visualizing or just in like the Conjure environment,
Yeah.
if depending on how enormous the data set is that you're trying to view.
Sure, sure.
And so it ends up being this awesome tool where now it's a database tool, right? But then it's an API tool, right? You can use Postman or you can use a REPL. And if you call the API in the REPL, you can explore the API. You can begin to build up little functions that help you parse things out of it. And you're beginning to evolve a solution. You're beginning to build up code, evolve code that helps you work with that. And so it's a meta tool. And so you have all this functionality of a almost a purpose built tool to help you get tasks done as a developer, but you're also evolving honest to goodness code at the same time and building a lot of certainty around it.
So we are a show, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here because I know that you are comfortable on the spot and enjoy being on the
Okay.
spot. Um, do you have, when in your role as a developer advocate, do you have any prepared demos or anything that you would walk someone through that you could show us? Could you give us the new developer experience or the
I do not yet. That's definitely one
okay.
of the things I want to make. Um,
Hmm.
I have done a lot of interviews with Clojure developers over the last several years, and definitely that it's become clear in with new developers, know either somebody has showed you that experience or somebody hasn't. And
Mm,
so, Eric, I know like you have a course. And so I've
Hmm.
heard from a few people, for example, you showing a connected editor in your course was the
Hmm.
first time they saw that. And they're like, oh, what is this? And I've met with people who have never been shown that. And so it's not a concept. And then Peter Stromberg, Pez, in Calva, he changed kind of the intro into Calva to even try to emphasize that connectedness. It's like we're going to
Hmm.
jack in and bring up the panel and then evaluate these expressions. So we're getting there, but I really would like to make something that shows that more clearly. And so
Yeah.
that's really where I want to focus my attention in the near term is in those fundamental steps, because back to where we started, the mission for me really is to allow more people to experience this awesome way of doing things that we have in
mhm.
Clojure that from the outside looks really weird and strange and is almost incomprehensible once you put the syntax there too, right?
Yeah.
It's not obvious. You don't just
Yeah.
look at it and go, "Oh, wow, I want that."
Well,
You look
and
at that and go, "That's weird."
if you're
And
just
why would
writing
anyone do that?
if you're just writing Python but with Clojure syntax, it's not enough of a benefit to like
Our intern had immutability was actually a big
a big
hurdle for
deal.
him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it when I try and switch into another programming language, it's mutability has
It's
become
scary. It's like
hard for
somebody
me.
could
I don't
change this
like it.
thing.
Like someone's touching, no, don't touch that.
It's
I
like
didn't say you
Copy
ever
terrifying,
touch
right?
everything.
that. Where did it go? Put that back. Like put that down. Uh, and that's the kind of thing where, we take it for granted because it's a deliberate decision that was made
Yeah.
by Rich, that's immutability was a deliberate decision that we take for granted that is actually a radical departure from the way of thinking in other mainstream languages.
Because most
Yeah.
languages, data structures are kind of the things you use with algorithms,
Mm,
right? So it's like, oh, I need a stack because I'm doing this algorithm with a name, and it uses a stack. And it was developed with mutable data structures in mind. And we use them in this more data-oriented way where we're building up this big value nested thing and passing that around as like it represents something. It's a container for all the information in the way that maybe you would use a class, an object in another language. Um, and so it's very different. It's not this thing for like, you know, doing depth first search or whatever. I mean, we do that, right? But like
that's my
that's not
data.
the
I don't
point.
know you.
Yeah.
Christoph, you've got this, you've done this research, probably still ongoing, and you've come to this conclusion that we need like more like a better beginner path. Have you started working on that? Is there like a set, first learn this, then learn that, and to get someone to this level?
Yeah, that's where I'm at is beginning work on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say if you're listening, if you're brand new to Clojure, or if you know somebody brand new to Clojure, I would love to talk to them.
Mm.
If you,
I've
the
got an
easiest
intern for
way,
you.
yeah, you can get a hold of me in Clojure and Slack as Newman.
Okay.
you can go to christophneumann.dev and schedule time with me or get links to things there if you want. So I'm very interested. And so that's where I want to focus my attention. There's resources that are there already. And so I'm not saying it's in a miserable state or anything, but I'm just saying that I want to continue to have more conversations with people who are brand new,
Yeah.
who are interested in Clojure and are brand new, and understand two things: the obstacles they're aware of, and the things that they need to know that they're not aware of yet. So I had an interview a few weeks back with a new Clojurist, and in that interview, I've just learned, right. There's this inventory of things that you kind of need to know.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I mentioned is like, have you ever heard of structural editing? And he had never heard of that. He had no idea what it was. And because I was watching him show off some code, and it reminded me of when I was first learning and I'd never learned structural editing. And so without inciting the whole par infer, par edit,
Mm.
debate, you do need an editor experience that helps you, like to get into flow. Your
Yeah.
editor will help you with the syntax. And
Right.
and so um that's a thing. But you're because C like languages, it's just mostly about tabbing. In Python, it's just mostly about tabbing.
Right. And you're not
You're not relocating whole subtrees in your code with your editor like
right.
you do in Lisp.
Right. You might be relocating lines. Like I find in VS Code, there's a lot of keystrokes for like move this line up one. And like
Right.
that doesn't work when you've got a closing parens and you want to move
Right.
the, starting paren to the end paren for that. Whatever nesting comes along with it. If it's 4 lines
Yeah.
long, you want to move the whole thing. Yeah.
So that's a good example. Like that's sort of an entry into structural editing. Like, oh, you know how you can move lines around? Well,
Hmm.
Clojure lets you move lines around, but so much more, right? It lets you nest things, it lets you
Yeah.
track something
So do
nested.
you envision building like a starter kit where it's an interactive demo that maybe includes a editor setup in Canva or something? Like do
I would
you
love to do that. I would love to do that. Yeah, I think without committing to a specific vision right now, I think
yeah.
I would love to get to the point. The ideal is what are the tent poles that you need to have? What are
Yeah.
the stakes that you need to
Mhm.
sort of have solidly to do well in Clojure, right? And so it's more than just the language syntax,
Yeah.
right? And so um off the top of my head, I would say you need the runtime, you need an editor, you need to learn the syntax of the language, you need to learn actually how to kind of edit code, which sounds, I don't mean to make that sound demeaning, but because of structural editing, there's a different way of editing, right? So you need to then learn the basics of core, which is
Right.
another learning curve, and then immutability,
Yeah.
and and then there are these, and then you need to learn when you do need to have changes, right? Mutable, like how do
Sure.
you
The
do that? And
atoms
then
and stuff.
interop, because it's a hosted language. So we're
Right.
now at 8 concepts. We're
And you haven't even
eight
mentioned REPL.
Yeah.
basic concepts. Oh yeah, and connected editor, that whole workflow,
and
right?
and then data oriented, right? So like now
Well,
you're
but that's eight,
yeah,
like first eight
yeah,
first steps.
yeah,
And
sure.
so you're like, and so that's because like Clojure is a whole package of choices that are different. Some of those choices came from Lisp, so they're inherited. And I'm not
Hmm.
going to say that in a negative way, right? Lisp syntax came along for the ride
Yeah,
because of the Lisp is the way Lisp is. And that is beneficial. So some of those choices aren't rich choices, they're pre-existing. But some of those is rich taking choices and putting them together. And and so you have a whole package of differentness. And so it's several steps away from the most widespread programming languages. So when you have to get somebody several steps away from where they're at,
Hmm.
that
Mhm.
requires a clear path with clear supports to help them do that in a way that's delightful and fun and exciting and not frustrating, because you're really going off the beaten path at that point in time.
Yeah. Man, I wish you good luck on this because there is quite a lot, and like I teach, and so I deal deal in beginner material a lot. I've spoken to a lot of beginners, and it is I've been doing this so long, I forget cursive expertise. Just forget how many things people need to learn. Um, and it's good to encounter beginners like in a certain point in their journey, and you're like, oh man, like so. For instance, I made a REPL driven development course, and before I did it, I thought, there's, I mean, what does this even mean? Like everybody does it differently. Like there's nothing really to learn. But then I just started asking people how they use it, and a lot of the people who don't do REPL driven development, there are people out there who do Clojure without connecting to a REPL, which I find um, odd. Like, I don't know why you would do that, but they do. And what I realized was there was quite a bit of stuff that like was like universal, that like I just didn't realize people didn't know this stuff. And one of
Right.
the things was you kind of have to know the evaluation model of Clojure to do REPL-driven development. You
Mhm.
have to
Yes.
understand how namespaces work, how a var looks up the symbol in the namespace, and so that you can redefine that that function, and references to that function elsewhere are getting the new definition because it's a ref, right? And
Right.
like all of that stuff is is necessary to be able to confidently recompile this piece of code, that piece of code, and not and kind of get yourself out of situation, because you do get into corners sometimes where you're like, oh, I gotta start over, blow the namespace away, reload everything. Um, and there's it's a whole thing. I don't know how long my course is, like hours just for REPL driven development.
Right. Right. Yeah, before, I mean, there's tooling too to help you with that workflow.
Sure.
Also, because you run the Clojure runtime, and your goal is to just keep it running as long as possible. And when I first
Right.
started, even when I learned about the interactive, I kept stopping the REPL to like get rid of things and then launching it again and stopping it and launching it again.
Right.
And then later, I use component quite a bit as the component library. So the component with a capital C as the component library. And there's tools for that. So you can like start your system of components and stop them, and then start them and stop them. So you're not constantly restarting your REPL. And so yeah, that's a great example of each of these areas has some depth. And so how do you get
Mm.
somebody started? Right? How do you get somebody started,
Yep.
but in a way that keeps it fun? And so there are resources out there, but there's also a bit of a choose your own adventure.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what matters, how do you choose? And so when you give people choose your own adventure resources where you go and it's an index of things, if you don't know what to choose, you just start trying to read them all and try things.
I would
And
love
so
to see a kind of um, what is it called? Like a learning tree, with skill
yeah, Java
tree.
Java did this with
Mhm.
trails. Do you remember
Uh,
like way back when Java can't, it's
like
like
just
the
like a
learning
badge. Like
trails.
I've edited code with pair edit. I've gotten my REPL connected. I recompiled some code, and you just get badges for like doing,
Yeah, yeah,
and
there you go.
you can
Yeah.
go on a little adventure where you learn how to light a fire, and you get a fire merit badge. Like that's what we
Right.
need. Some little fun thing like, hey, today I'm gonna learn how to
It
you know,
it would be
I
great
don't
to have a starter pack.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I we could have really used one, you know. we handed him a lot of different things, right? And that's there is kind of a choose your own adventure. There are resources, but
Yeah.
the resources, and I mean, part of your problem in designing this is you're going to have to make some choices around things the community feels very strongly about, like tooling. Uh,
Yes.
and that's so like, we gave our intern Clojure for the brave and true because that's probably the most fully featured beginner's guide out there right now. But it's very strongly opinionated about Emacs
It
and
is.
introduces Emacs very early. And that workflow didn't work for him. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's, but then, you are, if you introduce the official Clojure getting started guide, and maybe the safest thing to do is uh IntelliJ, because that's the
Mhm.
one that the core team uses. uh but
It's
like,
well,
it's
there's a lot of
people
people who use Emacs too. I
people
mean, the
feel
challenge
very,
even with IntelliJ
yeah,
is it costs money,
yeah,
right?
that,
And
and there's
so
that people feel very strongly
that's
about
a
this.
barrier, right?
Yeah,
But
so you're going to have to make decisions about it, which I feel, I'm glad that's your job and not mine. Uh,
well, I think the way I look, the way I've come to view things is that I'm taking a shot at making something helpful or useful. It's not trying to be everything,
Mhm.
and it isn't trying to present all of the options that exist, but
Mm.
it can have some off ramps for you to go explore some other options. It can acknowledge them, but it's a smooth supportive path. That's the idea. Smooth supportive path.
I
And
like
so
that.
I do think it would benefit the community greatly.
Yes.
And it's for those people who have, like me, I have my setup, it works great. It doesn't help them a lot, but it would help them bring more people
Right.
in, which does help them,
Right.
right?
Go through this
So
adventure. Go get the
When
merit
you make
badge.
this, when you make this, we would love to have you back to walk us as new Clojure developers on
We'll
this
have a new
journey.
Clojure developer on too, and you
sure.
could,
I could get one. I
yeah,
have one.
that'd be
So
great.
uh,
So like, I think also not only for beginners, but also for companies
this is yeah,
to
like
know that they
traditionally.
can hire someone and either train them up or they can
Mhm.
see, oh, you've gone through this course yourself, so you must, understand, the basics of this
Right.
stuff. And just to have like, the Clojure core team um like endorse this curriculum,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
I think
yeah, a curriculum. Does Coursera even have like Clojure
I'm sure they do, but
courses?
I don't know how good they are.
No.
They don't?
If you search Clojure in Coursera, you get Kotlin, Scala, and a lot of Java stuff.
Yeah.
That's a, it would be great to have Clojure resources available on these platforms.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That
agree.
I, yeah, it's wonderful that you're doing this. We're very much missing it. We have a question from the chat that is getting scrolled out of the chat, so I want to grab it from Yo-Yo Broker, who would
Okay.
like to know non-programming related book recommendations from you.
Oh, a book recommendation that is not about programming.
That's
Hmm.
right.
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty easy.
All
There's
right.
a few. I would highly recommend the book Quiet by Susan Cain.
Quiet.
That is the tagline of Quiet is the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. And it's probably one of the best books I've read on kind of the whole idea of introvertism and extrovertism, and it's a lovely read. If you feel more like an introvert, it's a great read. If you
Yeah.
feel more like an extrovert, it's a great read. So you can't lose. I'd highly recommend that. And then another book I would highly recommend is a book Range by David Epstein.
Mm.
And it is all about going broad and deep. So one example, he talks about like the Tiger Woods model. Tiger Woods started playing golf when he had just barely learned to walk. And he sort of his parents sort of groomed him to be a professional golfer. And so we have in our head this idea that we have to get started young and we have to obsess over these things and and he paints another picture in this book that's very compelling based on data. His background is sports journalism, and he noticed that there was these phenomenal athletes that really it took them a while to kind of find their way into that sport. So you have Roger Federer in tennis, who's arguably one of the best tennis players of all time. He didn't even really start tennis until he was older. And how is this possible? And so he develops this theory that people who try a bunch of things, but then go deep in some of them. So you're not just always sampling. You're not just always a buffet sampling things, but then you lean into certain things, and then you kind of come up and you try some more things and lean in. Do really well. So it's a very uplifting, inspiring book. So both of those, I think, are wonderful books. You cannot go wrong reading them. I
All
could
right, so
I could
it's not
recommend more and more, but those are
Thank
two.
not too late, not too late to become a professional golfer for any of us.
Well, I
you.
love yes, yeah, I love range because I have interacted with people who come into programming further on in their adult life, and while I was in grad school, I wanted to be a research professor, and I decided to leave grad school. I got my master's, and I was working on my PhD dissertation, and I was just getting into that process, and I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And so I left, but I loved teaching. And so I continued to teach at Oregon State for a few years. And some of my best students already had a bachelor's degree. They were called post-bac, and they were coming back for a different bachelor's degree. One of my best intro to programming students ever, she had been a professional opera singer for 10 years, and she had a music major. So she had a bachelor's of arts in music, did professional opera, was successful, was coming back to be in computer engineering. And I had her in intro to computer science. And I loved working with her because she was totally serious about being there. She's smart. But she had a lot of this doubt, like, well, I'm a musician. Can I really do this? And it's like, yes, you can, because this is about applying yourself. And so, anyway, I'll never forget that. So, in reading the book, it reminded me you can be 37 and start programming, you can be 52 and start programming, you can be 12 and start programming, right? It's a delightful book that it's very inspiring.
All right. These are great. So that we will put these in the show notes, along with some talks that have been referenced, that folks have been looking up, in the chat. So we can refer people to them as well. We are now 2 minutes past our hour-long runtime. So, uh, and we know that you are very busy.
Yeah.
I have a lot on my schedule at
Yeah.
various times, yes.
And we want you
But
to do good at your job. Like it's very important.
We
We're
want
very
I
happy
more.
will
that you have it.
I will say part of my job and something that gives me the information that I need to make great things for you is talking with people. And so I really do want to talk to people, have interviews with people, hear about their Clojure experience. As I mentioned before, you can reach me in Clojure in Slack. That's probably the easiest way. You can go to my website, christophneumann.dev, um, schedule time. And I really would. And yeah, and Mia, I'm happy to talk more with you offline, about how things went, bringing in the intern and things like that,
Yeah.
because I would love to continue to make that process great. There's always
It's
room
on my
for
mind.
improvement, and I think
Yes.
it's an area that is worth focusing on right now, and that's what I'm focusing on.
That's wonderful. It's been on my mind since I started. Clojure was my first professional programming language, and it was hard to I don't know if I would have been able to get started if I hadn't been living in San Francisco at the time.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
surrounded
Yeah,
by
it's
others.
amazing because there's already so many obstacles to taking on professional programming,
Yeah.
and then Clojure adds some more things on top of that. And so, yeah, it's amazing. And I will say there's sort of this paradox of advocacy, right? If you paint the dream for someone, like Clojure is an amazing experience. You paint the dream, and you paint it such that they begin to be like, wow, I got to try this. I got to try this. And then there, all the expectations are high. And you send them over there and they have a bad experience.
Mm.
You're creating your biggest detractors, right?
Hmm.
And so it's incredibly important in advocacy to not just simply promote, but to prepare
Yeah.
so that you can say walk through that door, buy your ticket to the amusement park, and don't worry, it's a little expensive, I know, but once you're there, you're going to love it, right? Well, that comes with a lot of work to make sure that experience when you buy your ticket and you go through those gates is a wonderful experience. And so you need both. If nobody's ever heard of it, well, you have a problem too, right? But you also have to prepare what is the landing zone? What's the place? What's the gate? What is the front gate to the incredible
Yes.
experience that you're going to have? And how do you walk into it? What does that look like? So that's the paradox of advocacy. You have to promote but prepare.
Nice.
All
Awesome.
right. Well,
Well,
thank
I'm
you so
I'm
much.
yeah, thank you. I'm confident it's in good hands. Thank you for doing this work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's
for being on the show and
Yeah,
for
thanks for having
talking
me.
to
It's a
us.
pleasure. I'm happy
I
to come on
whatever you
again.
come up with, I can't wait to share it with everyone.
Hmm.
It's very exciting. This is we do this show because we're passionate about Clojure, because we love it, because we want people talking about it, and we want to be some of the people talking about it. It, the it attracts such a range of people that the community is itself a selling point in a way that
Hmm.
it's not for a lot of other languages. I feel like,
Yeah.
it's not just a programming language.
It's a way of
It's
life.
it's a group of really thoughtful people who have
Yeah.
made decisions in their lives on purpose, and those
Right.
Yeah.
decisions include their programming language. Uh,
Yep.
and that's I want all like-minded people to come learn Clojure,
Right.
write Clojure. Welcome.
It's not the default path. So
Yeah,
if you're here on purpose.
yeah.
And that makes for a wonderful community, right? If it's just a default path, then who knows all the different motivations. But because you have to be here on purpose, the Clojure community is full of people who've been through it and care. And it's a wonderful place.
I love the idea of opening the gate to the path. I think that's beautiful. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for talking to us
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone watching, please subscribe so that um, you can be notified of the next awesome guest who comes on. And thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay. I ended the stream. I hope that's at the right point.
All
I'm
right,
gonna
I'm
put
gonna
in the